Hello, everyone. Today's topic is happiness eludes you, because there's something you don't know what Buddha taught. The thing that everybody seeks in life is, in short, happiness. Each person has their own unique goals in life, like earning money, gaining fame, or finding love, but ultimately, what these all boil down to is a desire to gain happiness. No one wishes to be unhappy. What everyone wants in life is happiness. People therefore endlessly research, plan for, and strive to attain happiness day in, day out. But how many people actually manage to find a real sense of happiness in life? It doesn't seem to be very many. We might feel great happiness for a time, but before long it's gone. Our reality is that we are unable to gain any lasting happiness. So then, the question is, why can't we be happy despite the fact that we want to be? Buddhism's answer is that it is because there is something we do not know. That something is the topic of today's video. Happiness eludes us because we don't know this thing, says Buddhism. So let us explore what exactly that thing is. I hope for this video to be an eye-opener for anyone who eagerly wishes for happiness. Anyone who wonders why they can't find happiness, anyone who wants to know what exactly happiness even is, and anyone who is interested in exploring the philosophical meaning of happiness. Today, I will talk about these 3 points. First, the etymology of koufuku. Second, Ambrose Bierce. Third, Akutagawa Ryunosuke. The Japanese word for happiness is koufuku, and the meaning of the Chinese characters it is written with is revealing. The second character, fuku, signifies food, clothing, and shelter. The left side of the character represents clothing. The bottom half of the right side means field and represents eating. The top half of the right side represents a house. This box has a roof over it, you see, signifying a place to live. So fuku means having enough food, clothing, and shelter. This then represents happiness. Having food, clothing, and shelter is a happy, fortunate thing. If you don't have anywhere to live, or you're starving because you don't have food, or you are feeling cold, you'll be unhappy, but if these basic needs are met, you'll be happy. To meet these basic needs, you have to earn money. To earn money in modern society, you have to get a job. For that, you'll need talent and connections, and it's also important to get along well with your colleagues. You also need to be mentally and physically healthy, or else you won't be able to keep working. These things are really important when it comes to living our lives. So in order to meet our basic needs, we need money, a job, talent, social skills, and good health. Having all of these is a happy state of being. That's what fuku represents. Next, this character, ko, means happiness, but actually represents handcuffs. It's derived from Chinese logographs. Why would handcuffs represent happiness? Usually, if someone was walking around town in handcuffs, people would wonder what that person did, and if they're going to jail, they wouldn't seem like a fortunate person. The reason for this character in happiness representing handcuffs goes back to Chinese history. When a Chinese state was conquered, many people would be killed, and prisoners would suffer horrible things like having their ears or noses cut off. People would be lined up, and soldiers would slash them to death with swords. But if one of those people looked strong and like they could be used for labor, that person would be spared and handcuffed instead. The handcuffed person would look up at the sky with tears of delight, rejoicing at their great fortune for not being killed. If there was a particularly beautiful woman amongst those people, she too would be handcuffed because she'd be useful as a slave. So, being handcuffed meant you were saved. You weren't going to die, you'd get to live. That's why this character represented happiness. What if you were in those people's position? Wouldn't you hope you'd be handcuffed instead of slashed to death too? Comparatively speaking, being handcuffed was a happier fate than being put to death. Of course, for those who are free, being handcuffed seems unfortunate, but those who are about to be killed would see being handcuffed as far more fortunate. So what this shows us is that our happiness is relative or based on comparisons. The fact of the matter is that the comparisons we make lead us to feel happy or unhappy. While it's true that having or not having the basic necessities of life will make us feel happy or unhappy, whether we feel fortunate or not depends on whose circumstances we are comparing our own to. We look at others around us and make comparisons. We think we'd be happy if only we had this or that, or we think that we're worse off than everyone else. So clearly, our happiness is a relative thing. The author Ambrose Bierce wrote a book called The Devil's Dictionary. It's a humorous, satirical dictionary. If you look at the entry for happiness, it says, an agreeable sensation arising from contemplating the misery of another. You might think it's an exaggeration to say that happiness comes from seeing others' misery, but actually, Bierce is not exactly wrong. Since our happiness is based on comparisons, we feel happy when we look at those less fortunate than us, and dissatisfied when we look at those more fortunate than us. Take getting into university as an example. If asked what the happiest moment in their life was, a lot of people would probably say it was when they got into their university of choice. If we put that in a slightly harsh way, it was when another candidate failed to take the spot they wanted. If all candidates passed, they wouldn't have been that happy. People don't rejoice if, say, they go to a middle school that everyone else they know is going to anyway, because there's nothing special about it. What people are experiencing is the joy of having passed because someone else failed. And the more highly selective the school is, the more joy they'll feel. If you're the only person that passed, that makes you a rare success story, which is a joyous thing. Since few other people manage it, your good fortune stands out. This being the case, although it might be rather uncharitable to call happiness an agreeable sensation arising from contemplating the misery of another, there is some truth to it. I once heard about a 5-person project that someone joined under the supervision of senior staff. They worked on this project for some time. Then when it was finally completed, the senior staff member called this one person over in secret. Let's call this person Mr. A. The senior staff member said to Mr. A, "You really did such great work on this project. It's thanks to you that we got this done. Now this is only small, but go and get yourself something nice to eat, okay?" He then handed him an envelope with a $100 bill inside it. Mr. A was so happy. Not only had he received money, but also appreciation. He was so delighted that his efforts were valued. It was the happiest he'd been since he entered the workforce. However, the next day, upon talking with his colleagues, he found out that everyone else had received money as well. That, in itself, was disappointing, as he thought he'd received special recognition. But then he found out that everyone else had received $500, and that only he had received $100. Immediately he was filled with misery. Why did I only get $100 when everyone else got $500? He wondered, I guess I'm not appreciated after all. He felt forsaken, discontent, and worried, and his heart was filled with darkness. Now receiving $100 is not some kind of loss, and it's not like something was stolen from him, but the joy he felt at being the only one to receive a monetary gift was suddenly replaced by misery when he found out he was the only one to get $100 while the others all got $500. Getting $100 is in itself neither fortunate nor unfortunate. It's how it compares to other situations that determines whether we'll feel happy or sad about it. So what the first character in the word for happiness expresses is that what makes us happy is relative and based on comparison. It's through comparison that we end up happy or sad. About 10 years ago, there was a TV program in Japan about Bhutan that stated that the country's entire population is happy. Everyone there has a place to live, food to eat, and their families near, so they say they feel blessed and happy. Given that Bhutan is still a poor developing country, you might wonder why the people seem to be so happy. Bhutan has been showcased as some kind of wonder country because of this. However, Bhutan's happiness index has since been falling sharply. Data from 2019 puts it at number 95 out of 156 countries. And it's fallen more since then. What's the cause? Smartphones. Now the people of Bhutan all have smartphones. They can browse the likes of TikTok and YouTube, which means they see the luxurious houses, food, and scenery of advanced nations. Then they start feeling dissatisfied with their own circumstances, aghast to realize how poor they are in comparison, and wishing they could have better houses and clothes and the like. So gaining access to this information has led them to compare their own situation with that of advanced nations, which has only made them dissatisfied and unhappy. This really brings home the relative nature of happiness. People often say that happiness is a state of mind. You've probably heard of the glass half full analogy. It often appears in self-help books. If water is poured so that it comes up to the halfway point of a glass, those who call it half empty are said to have a more negative, anxious, and impatient mindset, while those who call it half full are said to have a more positive, grateful mindset. This analogy is commonly used to back up the idea that happiness is a state of mind. So people say that instead of thinking the glass to be half empty, we should see it as half full. We should reflect on the fact that we are fortunate enough to have our family, to be able to eat 3 meals a day, and to have people who support us, and we should be grateful for it. It certainly does help to reflect on things we should be grateful for. But if you find that all your friends' glasses are 80-90% full, it's difficult to feel grateful for having a glass that's half full. We can't help but compare ourselves with others no matter how much we might be told not to. If a mother goes to lunch with her friends and finds out they're all living a much nicer lifestyle than she is, she's naturally going to feel like her glass is half empty. If, on the other hand, her friends are all just scraping by, then she'll feel happy to have a glass that's half full. In this way, a person's peace of mind and satisfaction are greatly impacted by how their own situation compares to that of the people they closely associate with. Since this kind of happiness comes from comparisons, it is called relative happiness. Novelist Akutagawa Ryunosuke described life as an Olympic game hosted by lunatics. Now, the Olympics is a competition. In the Olympics, the top competitors get medals in descending order of greatness: gold, silver, and bronze. If we're in an Olympic game hosted by lunatics, first of all, that means we are in a competition. We're all competing on a circular racetrack like this. Since relative happiness is based on comparisons, ultimately, it is a competition. We feel reassured when we see people lagging behind us and anxious when we see others making better progress than us. If the people behind us start getting closer and closer to us, then we feel anxious. We hate being overtaken, but if we overtake people in front of us, we feel triumphant and happy. Therefore, we're always desperately striving to overtake the person ahead of us and avoid being overtaken, and we feel happy or sad, depending on whether or not we succeed at this. When we overtake someone, we feel happy for a time. Overtaking someone means, say, getting into university, in which case being overtaken would mean failing the entrance exam. Climbing the corporate ladder is another way in which we might overtake someone while failing at that means being overtaken. And so we're always forced to compete with each other. We think, all right, if I just overtake A, then happiness lies waiting for me. But then another battle begins after that. Success only brings temporary happiness. Next, we've got to overtake Alpha, and we won't feel satisfied until we do. This cycle of competing with people one after another just keeps going on and on and on. At school, you compete for the best university place. At work, you compete to see who can get ahead sooner. Amongst fellow mothers, you compete to see whose child does the best. So we're constantly comparing ourselves with others and become elated or miserable based on it. Life really is a perpetual competition. The reason why Akutagawa said that life is an Olympic game hosted by lunatics is that there isn't an end goal. No matter how long we keep running for, no one will ever cross the finish line and be declared the winner of life. We'll just carry on competing endlessly without graduation or completion. Buddhism calls this the endless wheel of suffering. In life, we are constantly running around and around the same track without end, striving with all our might to reach happiness at last, despite the fact that no such finishing point exists. Eventually, we get old and die having never reached the goal in the endless competition for happiness. In this way, we are stuck in an endless wheel of suffering. Buddhism teaches that one can break free from this endless cycle and attain true happiness, called absolute happinesses. Where relative happiness is based on comparisons, absolute happiness requires no comparisons whatsoever. In the Song of Pure Land Shin Buddhism, we find, I have been saved and freed from eternal darkness. Nothing can compare to this profound joy that fills my being. Buddhism teaches that there is happiness that is utterly beyond comparison to anything else, and the Song of Pure Land Shin Buddhism declares to us the existence of this incomparable happiness. So, how do we attain this joy? By being saved and freed from eternal darkness. Eternal darkness here is another name for the Buddhist concept of darkness of no light. Buddhism teaches that we have been trapped in endless suffering since the long distant past because of darkness of no light with a dark mind, and this song expresses immense joy at finally having had this eternal darkness cleared up. It takes only an instant for this darkness to be vanquished. It is gone in the blink of an eye, the moment the light comes in. After all, even if a room has been entirely dark for thousands of years, the darkness is dispelled as soon as light hits it. That instant is called an ichi-nen. Master Shinrin said that ichi-nen indicates the utmost speed. In the shortest possible unit of time, the darkness of no light is destroyed and we attain absolute happiness, or absolute peace and joy in Buddhist terms. However, this doesn't mean we don't need relative happiness. We can't go on living if our basic needs aren't met, so it's actually very important. It's precisely because we are living that we can attain true happiness, you see. Once we attain this happiness, we are filled with delight at having been born and getting to live, since we would have gone to our deaths without knowing this happiness if we hadn't reached that point. We cannot help but be grateful for everything that sustained our lives until then. Once absolute happiness is made thoroughly known to us, we will see with full clarity just how profoundly important relative happiness is. So I wanted to end off by making clear that Buddhism does not disparage relative happiness. Today's topic was Happiness Eludes You because there's something you don't know. That something is that there are two kinds of happiness, relative and absolute. You only know relative happiness, so you're stuck in an endless marathon without a goal. Once you know both relative happiness and absolute happiness, the great value of both these kinds of happiness will become clear to you. Thank you for watching this video.